Good evening, everyone, and welcome back again on the Lichess broadcast commentary. And today is the second day of the Casablanca Chess Variant 2024 in Morocco, where there are four top players playing: Magnus Carlsen, Hikaru Nakamura, Vishwanathan Anand, and Amin Bassam. And without further ado, let's get on to the live cameras, where most of the players are already seated and they're waiting for our world number one to joining the party, because apparently Magnus Carlsen is still missing. Players are getting ready to play for round 4, and before we continue this, let's update ourselves on the standings. And in the standings, we will have Magnus Carlsen leading with 2.5, and then followed by Hikaru Nakamura with 2 points, and Anand and Amin Bassam follow behind with 1 point. So today's round number 4. It is yet to know the position that they're going to play, but I'm just going to make a guess. It should be somewhere in maybe in the modern chess, because we've seen most of the games playing in the kind of like in the past era. So maybe I'm hoping actually that round number 4 will be somewhere, the game from the current or the recent World Championship match, maybe from 2000 and above. Well, and apparently Magnus Carlsen is already arrived there on the board, and they are going to play out the first few moves that will be played. So yeah, I cannot wait to see what's the starting position will be. So we have some moves on the board. We have here, it's a French defense, Paulson variation with bishop b4, and okay. So the position will be taken from move 10 to 15, somewhere from move 10 to 15, and mainly in about move, they are kind of like stopping on move 8 now. So probably this is gonna be our position. Okay, so I'm just looking at the Master Lichess database. It's a well-known win-hour variation, of course, and but this can happen from any game, pretty much. So I will have my information soon of whose game they are going to play, but this is going to be the starting position. And please be reminded again, the players will have 15 minutes plus 10 seconds. So today, we will play the remaining 3 rounds. The first day, yesterday, Magnus Carlsen won 2 games and drew 1 game, and he's on 2.5 right now, and telling just half a point behind, I guess. Magnus Carlsen, telling a point behind is Hikaru Nakamura. And has the game started? Or the clocks? I haven't seen the clocks yet on the Lichess, so maybe it hasn't started yet, and maybe after they shook their hands it's gonna be just started. And there you go, we have a liftoff and the clock has been started. And so here Anand is currently thinking against Magnus Carlsen, and on the other board it will be Amin Bassam playing white against Hikaru. So what are we thinking on this position? Normally you would like to play a move like bishop b5, bishop g5, something like this, but is there anything? Yeah, so knight d2 is of course another common idea. And now we just want to protect everything on the center like this. And so Magnus Carlsen is still thinking. Well, on the other hand, Man, I mean, Bossum, has it played? No, he hasn't played. So he hasn't played a move. He's still also thinking where, and he took the pawn on c5. So he played a different approach to Magnus Carlsen right now, and I'm just gonna check with the eval bar which move is the better move, d takes c5 or knight e2 or other move. So knight e2. Apparently Anand has played the computer move here. Although after dc5 it's still pretty much fine. So here white is quite spoiled with a few options. It's just two different approaches that white can play in this position. Alright, so dc5 is on the board and Hikaru hasn't moved yet. And what about the other board? So Anand has played knight e2 and Magnus Carlsen immediately replied with knight bd7. So getting ready, if anything like this happened, the knight will recapture it back, and it looks like a pretty good position. And now maybe the other question is, since the knight is blocking the bishop, now maybe it's the time to play g3 and bishop g2. Or could it be something else? Maybe we can also try to play with the bishop first. But yeah, bear in mind, bishop g5 is looking just good, but the knight on f6 is quite overprotected. So it's not really like it's threatening anything. Okay, so yeah, so Anand is still thinking, and we'll go back to the other game, in Possum versus Hikaru, where after d takes c5, Hikaru just play rook g6, trying to hit the queen, so the queen has to go. And where is going to be the square for the queen? Usually it's somewhere around h4, but it's not limited to that square only. It's just usually how this plays out. But here yes. So Amin is still thinking, and Hikaru just he stood up and he was just trying to look around if okay, I have to refresh the camera feed. Yeah, it's been changing a lot. So alright, so I guess Anand has played something looking at the camera. So let's move back to Anand versus Magnus Carlsen, and yeah, this is the position. Alright, so now after knight e2, knight bd7, Anand decided to play knight g3. This is how he's going to develop his pieces, and now this bishop on f1 is going to be free again to go to e2 maybe, and just simply maybe just finish development by castling. So yeah, it's still pretty much a balanced position. So for black in this position, black will be just trying to also play b6, bishop b7, queen c7 maybe, or I'm not sure where the queen goes, maybe to e7, and then just have a long castle. And then this is the side where black will try to play, that is on the king side. So it's gonna be like a quite sharp game, because judging from the choice of the opening, it's it's win hour when one side is attacking the other side. So it's gonna be two opposite sides. And let's also update ourselves on the game between Amin Bassam versus Hikaru. And Amin still didn't move yet. He's still pausing and still thinking of where the queen should go in this position. Yeah, it's quite a double-edged position too, because in the basic principle, usually you don't want to get your queen out too prematurely, and you can see from this position, the only piece that white has in this position is the only piece that is out, that is the queen on h6. No other pieces are out except the pawns. And just take a look at the pawn formation that white has on the c file. It has triple pawns. Well, it doesn't really mean so much in this position because it still offers quite a rich initiative. So you can play this out completely without any worry, but you should be careful. And queen e3 has just been played. And okay, normally you wouldn't like to put the queen somewhere that can be attacked by the knight, but this is an exception because whenever this knight moves, then the e4 pawn will be lost. So maybe it is time for black to also develop his pieces. Queen f5 is just a very thematic response to it, and it's keeping an eye on the pawn on c5 and also the pawn on c3. And maybe shortly after this, the knight will go to d7 and then trying to hit the pawn on c5. And slowly after that, the bishop will also follow suit, and the king will be castled into safety. So I personally have no preferences in this game, but I always like to develop my pieces. Usually, in moment of doubts, it's always good to improve your pieces because you will need your pieces to keep the game alive. So in this position, you know which one is my preference. I like black position here just because we already have 3 pieces out compared just the queen on e3. But again, this position is still going to be quite interesting because now maybe it's time for the knight to move to h3 or to e2 with eventually occupying the f4 square. And this is just gonna be, I guess, the square for the knight. Or what else can we expect in this position? Maybe a move like bishop d2 followed by c4. This is also a possibility. Still very rich of options, and yeah, there are plenty of other options as well. Maybe a4, why not a4? And then with this bishop goes to b5, and maybe with bishop a3 too. Ooh, I don't know which one to choose from. Also I have to make a rouse here. What about if, oops, not like that, it's a mouse slip. What about I just play bishop b2 followed by long castle? That way I put my king into safety, just 2 moves away, and then also having the rook on the one square. Sometimes I can try to stop the other king to castle as well and attacking the d file. So yeah, white is of choices here. And let's take a look the game. Oh, what happened? Amin chose to play rook b1. Wow. Okay, so this is also very interesting because this rook is preventing the bishop to move out, and also at the same time there should be some pieces occupying b5. It could be the bishop b5 or rook b5. Also at the same time, maybe you can also play rook b4, just trying to stop the queen from attacking the c3 pawn. Okay, it's still in the game. I like how Amin plays these original ideas. So knight b d7. Now I think rook b1 is a preparation for bishop b5. Let's put it out. So if bishop b5, if rook takes e2, let's say, maybe it's time to play c6. And just take a look at this position. The pawn is attacking the knight. Of course, if the knight moves anywhere, it's gonna be a discovery like this. But if the knight doesn't move, it means the pawn has to take on c6, and if pawn takes c6, bishop takes c6, and now this bishop is attacking the rook. If the rook goes to b8, you can just capture it because this knight is pinned. So, wow, bishop b5, I like this idea, and this might be what Amin has planned ahead. But he has to be careful, and again, this is only a rapid game. It's 15 minutes plus 10 seconds, so whatever he decides, he has to decide it fast. So meanwhile, let's take a look at the game between, oh, Amin is about to move, and no, he didn't move bishop b5. He moved something else. He moved knight e2, and I don't know what I'm feeling about this knight e2, because of course this is a very natural looking move. You want to get out, but with the inclusion of rook b1, is it really necessary? Because you could have just played knight e2 before. Okay, so while we are going to, of course, come back to this one, let's update ourselves on the game between Anand versus Magnus, because this has turned to be quite a totally different approach to the other game. So here in the starting position, Anand chose to play knight a2, followed by knight bd7, knight g3, queen a5, attacking c3, and here bishop d2 with a very simple developing move like that, queen a4. And now, how to deal with this threat on c2? Should we just ignore it? And indeed, Anand ignored that one. And what happened after queen takes c2? Maybe the follow-up move would be bishop b5, and then now you can just castle. To be honest, I like this approach better than the other one because it offers more stability to white's position. It gives clear ideas on how to proceed with the game. And well, Anand is a very experienced player, and we can just see on the live camera right now that after d takes c5, Magnus just played rook g6. This is a very common move as well in this type of position. When the queen is occupying h6, you just want to kick it away. And if in this position Armin Bassam played queen e3, we'll just wait and see where or which square that Anand will choose to go with his queen. Judging from this position, queen e3 is a really likely move, because by playing queen e3 you also are trying to play maybe queen d4 and offering this exchange. But of course this is still well, this is a very feasible possibility. So Anand is being very calm there. He's going to calculate and think. He still has enough time on the clock. We will have the updated time situation soon, but meanwhile let's come back to Armin versus Hikaru, where in this position after knight bd7, Armin chose to play knight e2, and Hikaru just decided to grab the pawn on c5 with queen takes c5. And now the question is what to do as white. If the knight is already moved to e2, maybe you'd like to move it to d4. But if you move it now, unfortunately, maybe this is the move. Knight d5, and both of the pieces will attack c3. So here, Armin decided to just take on c5, knight takes c5, and bishop e3, and trying to play out this position with a pair of bishop advantage. So bishop e3 is already on the board, and now what to do here as black? Because also the knight doesn't really have good square to move. If you play b6 right now, which is what Hikaru did, it is also, well, maybe posing some weaknesses in the future, because maybe after this knight will go to f4 followed by bishop b5 check, and white will stand a little bit better. So b6 is still on the board and Hikaru still hasn't moved. And let's come back to the game between Anand versus Magnus again, where Anand didn't choose e3, but he chose queen f4 to go after rook g6, queen f4, and knight takes c5. Now, how to follow up this move? Because it looks like, yes, bishop e2, this is a very classical approach by Anand. He doesn't want to go for so much complication, but he knows how to continue this position. Bishop e2 follow up by castle, and then you connect the rooks, and then you just try to attack, because again, the black's king is still in the center and it is prone to some attacking. So bishop e2 is on the board. It's going to be very dangerous and very risky if Magnus Carlsen decided to take the pawn on c2. So we'll see what's going to happen. Okay, so bishop e2 is still on the board. There still hasn't moved yet by Magnus. So let's switch to the other board where this has played a few moves, and what happened was after knight f4, rook g8, and bishop b5 indeed happened as I predicted, and after bishop d7, bishop takes c5, b takes c5, and take on d7, and knight d7. So I would say that white has a slightly better position here, but of course anything can still happen. So now the question is, do you still need to castle in this position, because it's simplified a lot? Maybe you are better off with king e2, but watch out for this move. Yeah, but fortunately after that move there is still knight d5 with the idea of knight c7. So I think white can totally just play king e2 here. So king e2, and oh no, Armin just castled, which is I think equally good, because you just want to also attack the center and hit this pawn. So yeah, it's gonna be quite an awkward situation for Hikaru to play now. Maybe king e7, try to, yeah, and he just did it. King e7 is on the board, and it's also preparation. Whenever rook comes here, you can actually play f5, and whenever f3 happens, then that is going to be quite dangerous. Maybe e5 first. Alright, so now what else is there? Because after this, if the knight moves, then there's a check on the 7th rank, which is going to be nasty. But if you play rook f e1 and then f5, then maybe there's f3, because if you take this, rook will take on e6, then after king moves aside, maybe it's just g3, and the rook will be happy on the 7th rank like this, and also the king will try to catch this pawn on f3. So yeah, so black has to be really careful not to lose so many pawns in a row. My vote is for rook f1, but also alternatively after rook f e1 here, black can try to play rook b8 and then try to attack the white's back rank as well. You cannot take on e4, and here if you try to play g3, and now maybe it's time to play f5, because now after f3 there is this one takes and takes. So that is going to be what I was thinking, and it happened. Oh my gosh, it happened. Rook a b8 after rook f e1. Yeah, I think this is like the move that you have to play anyway to stop everything. So what happened was rook goes to b3, and still keeping the intensity over the b file. That if you take it, then white will be happy in consolidating the pawn structure again. Okay, so while this one has played out quite a little bit, let's also go to the other board, Anand versus Magnus, because we still have queens on the board and it looks more complicated. What just happened? It looks like, okay, I thought it was a sacrifice, but queen just take on d2. Now if white wants, white could take on c5, but white has to watch out about this idea and this idea. So what happened was after bishop e2, queen takes c2. Magnus took the risk, and after castling knight d5, attacking the queen, and the queen went to d6, and after that queen takes d2. I don't know whether this was Anand's intention all along, or maybe he just blundered, because now he's pausing where he should have just played the move right away, that is queen takes c5. Or could there be any other alternative apart from queen takes c5? I'm just wondering if this is also another possibility, because it looks really cool. One of the rooks going to here, and let's say the queen takes c5, and then maybe I can jump knight f5 like this. It looks just very fun, and because after this I can give a check first, or I can just simply take like this and then attacking the checkmate on the d8 square. And maybe this is what Anand is currently thinking, that he likes to create some attack along the d file, taking into account that the king is still on e8, and now this is also attacking both the d8 and the knight. And the thing is, if the knight moves, for example like this, so moving away from this threat and also protecting the square of d8, there is bishop b5, and this is game over. So what happened was Anand didn't do that, and maybe I missed actually some moves that should have been played, and he instead took on c5. I'm just going to check with the computer quickly what was going to happen in this position. Yes, queen takes c5 is totally fine. Queen takes c5 is the right move, and now maybe taking g3 would be a bit too optimistic, because there is this inclusion with a check, and after bishop b5, white can just simply take g3 without any worry. Alright, so queen takes c5, and you still have to be careful. Bishop b5 is going to come, and the king is still in the center. It makes me feel a bit worried there, because I'd like my king to be quite safe. And know what to do. Maybe bishop goes to d7, but this means you have to also think about this possibility. Knight takes e4, queen takes e2, knight d6 check, and maybe some sort of a discovery might also happen. But after king f8, I felt noticing any good discovery in this position. So alright, queen c5, maybe bishop d7, and just stopping anything with this bishop b5 idea. So, but the position is so rich. Maybe I can just play rook d1 and sacrifice on d5. This is also possible. And looking from the live cam, Magnus Carlsen doesn't look like he's happy with the position, so he just took on c3. And is it now the time to play bishop b5? Because after bishop b5, I think you are forced to play bishop d7 and going for this position, check, and maybe with queen c6 again. I've just no idea. But here, after queen c3, what else can we do in this position? Well, one way is to take on e4, but I doubt Anand would go something like that, because it's a bit too simple. After knight e4, queen takes c5, and knight takes c5. And what Anand did was just bishop c4, stopping this trade, while at the same time also threatening d5, but with the inclusion of rook ac1 later, so that he can take on d5 comfortably. This is a very dangerous position, and well, yeah, Magnus has to think really hard not to lose for the first time in this Casablanca Chess variant. And let's take a look on the other board, Almin Balsam versus Hikaru, which look like the situation has turned around. I thought white was better before, but now the knight is somehow on h3. It's quite misplaced, and it's not moving. So because of that, and also the center, I think black has a better center. So yeah, I think it's easy to tell that black has a better position in this one. What just happened? So we saw the position after rook b3, and then f5, f3, and knight f6, king f2, and e5. Yeah, this is a knight h3. What is going on? Why the knight cannot go to the other side? Like, let's say going to e2, because maybe if knight goes to e2, now it's time to play f4 with the idea of e3, and you're forced to take this, but then it comes with check, and it's just going to, whoa, this is going to be nasty, because wherever the king goes, there's always some attack. If the king goes here, there's check this, and then you kind of like win a material. But if the king goes to g1, then there is f3, and again, this is an attack to the knight, of course, and this rook is also attacking g2. And of course, this one is attacking f2. There's so many attacks in just one move. So therefore, Amin decided to go to h3, because there's no other place for the knight to be. And after knight h3, rook b6, allowing rook b8 on the next move, and trying to pressure the rook on b3. So I think Hikaru is in a very comfortable position right now. And while he is looking at the board comfortably like this, let's take a look at the game between Anand versus Magnus, where after bishop c4, Magnus replied with bishop d7. So I'm just trying to understand what is the idea behind this move. Maybe after rook goes to c1, he might be ready to play rook c8. Either it looks like everything is under attack, right? This might be just the move, because if you just move your queen, then bishop takes d5 would happen. But now after rook ac1, rook c8, what do? If you take the rook like this, you have to take this, and black will be happy to have this position. And again, after rook c8, if you what can you do in this position? If you take this, okay, of course, then black will take this. So therefore, Anand didn't play rook ac1, and instead he just took on e4, which is very good as well, because this knight is eyeing toward knight d6 jack. Wow, see, this is a very this is a very interesting, but isn't this, wait, hang on, there's rook takes, isn't it? Rook takes, king takes, and knight f4. Okay, but maybe it's just good for a draw, because no. Oh yes, it is good for a draw, because I thought there's queen g7, but knight just on time to go to g3. But here with this jack, and you have to come back here again, because if you go to h1, it's gonna be a checkmate on f3. So you have to go back to g2, and then I think the best that black can get is another check on f4, and there you go. You will have this repetition or perpetual. Yeah, oh my gosh. And what happened if white just tries to attack, and okay, something like this maybe? Does it looks really good, but is it winning? I still have to think, because I'm not too sure about this one, because now there are two threats, knight h3 and queen g2. And Magnus Carlsen is thinking, I'm sure he's thinking of sacrificing the rook. And he did it! He did it! Rook takes g2 is already on the board. And you have to take it. You have to take it. And after you take it, knight f4 is already on the board. At the very least, he has a repetition to make a draw. But here, king g1, knight h3, he might be repeating to gain the time. But after knight f4, here he's back to knight h3 again. So, and they agree for a draw. So I'm so happy to call it out before it happened. But I'm just also wondering what's going to happen if after this position we play queen f3. Is this a win? Because there might be some idea with knight d6 or knight f6, these type of checks, because maybe it is savable. Let me check. Let me check with the computer. And it is still a draw. Queen f3 is going to be a draw still, because you have to play knight d6 and then king e7. If the king goes to f8, let's say, then white will stand better after knight f5. Because after king g8, there is knight h6, and then king g7, queen g5. Now the question is who's attacking who. So therefore, Magnus Carlsen didn't want to take any risk like this, and he just repeats knight h3, knight f4, knight h3, and knight f4, and draw a grid. Meanwhile, let's take a look at one game that is still left standing between Amin Boston versus Hikaru Nakamura. Hikaru is still totally enjoying the position. He has a dominancy in this endgame, and with a very good center and potentially a better pair of rooks as well. Yeah, I think he's looking like he's tailing behind Magnus's leadership. So with his win, he's gonna be at least a little bit closer to sharing the first place. And I don't have the updated time adjustment for this one, but after rook a6, Hikaru still has 6 minutes on the clock, and I think Amin should have about 4 minutes or something. And we also can see from the other live cam that Magnus is currently discussing with Anand about their games, and what just happened, a4 is on the board. So I think both of the players could tell that black is better in this position, and Amin only has 1 minute on the clock. And please be reminded that the players only have 10 seconds increment per move, and here Nakamura has plenty of time on the clock. Okay, so after f4, what do we do here if we were black? Black has to be really careful that there is this idea with knight g5 coming, and you don't want to really disturb the position of the king on e6. Is looking really good. So maybe in this position, what about throwing in e3? Don't you think it's a interesting idea? Because if you take with the rook, there is this knight g4, and if you take with the king, you can grab a3 with a check. And if you don't do anything else, then the knight maybe could hope to e4. So maybe the king goes to if the king goes to here, and now what to do? It looks like it's pretty complicated, so maybe in this position you can actually take on a3 while at the same time also protecting e3. And after this, maybe you're ready to sacrifice things like that. And the knight, I know h2 will be fallen, but at least you will have some compensation after knight e4, taking on g5 later, and you have plenty of pawns in the center which might be deciding the game. So Hikaru has plenty of time as well on the clock. I think he's calculating everything just to make sure that the position will be won by him, because he is currently having a very good position. And what did he just do? He played something. He played knight g4 check, and now where does the king go? The king might actually have to go to g2 or g1, protecting the pawn on h2. And here Amin chose to play king g2, and I just like this idea of e3. I'm so ready to sacrifice my rook on g5 should this happen. So maybe this is what Hikaru is also currently planning, and he just grabbed his rook to d8. Wow, this is something that totally missed. So what happened after knight g5? The king has to go to f8, and after knight takes h7, let's say the king goes here and there is no more check. And if the knight goes back here again, then rook comes to the second rank, and this is going to be a very deadly attack. And what happened was, Amin didn't took on h7, but after didn't play knight g5, but he played rook e2, trying to stop the check on d2, and rook e2, rook a3, and after that knight g5, king f6. Okay, black has to be careful not to get into some checkmating net, but it's going to be far from that anyway, because the king has many squares to go. So after king f6, maybe it's time to grab the pawn. Again, I'm such a pawn grabber. I'd like to grab this free pawn if possible, but again, after knight takes king here, maybe the knight has to come back here, and this will be used, the time will be used for attacking this king. So it actually just happened. Knight g5, king f6. Okay, so now Amin is under 10 seconds. Okay, the time has finally updated, so he's now on 51 seconds. It's not a lot of time, it can go by just like that. So h4 is already on the board, and now how to continue this position? Is this a good inclusion to take on f4? Because you don't really need this pawn on e5 anymore, and maybe just like that, takes and then h6, and then you're trying to attack the knight. Okay, so Hikaru is double checking everything, and he took on f4. Yes, he took on f4, and I think white has to take it back like this. And yes, Amin took it back, and maybe now it's time to play h6, trying to kick this knight out, and also maybe at the same time saving your pawn, because this is kind of like a very dangerous position. If h5 happens and rook f7 is gonna happen, it's checkmating move. So it's best for you to get this out as soon as you can, because you cannot risk of you getting mated on f7. So what will Hikaru do in this position? And he did h6. He did h6, so this is a very wise idea, of course, and the only thing that you have to watch out is this move knight h7, and after king g6 it should be fine. So where does this knight go? If the knight goes away, then it's just gonna be a sad position. So I'm in play rook f7, and only move is king g6, but after here h5, king takes h5, there is almost no mating attack in this position, so knight goes to e6, but here you have to include this knight into the attack. So where can you go with this? Because there is also another idea of checking on g7, and perhaps not only checking that, but immediately take on f5. So this is also still going to be quite dangerous, because one pawn was sacrificed. I don't know whether this is still winning, but I guess so. So rook d1 is on the board, So now what happened after rook takes here? Maybe the king can just go to h4, be very brave, because it is going to be a checkmate in one. How amazing is this position? Rook d1, you cannot really take this, because if you do take it after king h4, you don't have any more checks, any more feasible checks. You can give your rook for free, but then that's it. So knight g7 is on the board, followed by sorry, what happened was knight g7, king g6, and rook c7. Alright, so it stopped the king from going to h4, because otherwise the knight will take on f5, and now maybe this pawn move will be a decider. How often is it that you get checkmated by a pawn? h5, h4, h3. And is there anything that's stopping that? Because the knight is quite tight here. The rook cannot move anywhere, otherwise the king will take the knight. So I'm so happy if I was going to play h5 like this. This is still the current position. Hikaru is still thinking, but I guess he's eyeing toward something like that. No, he played knight e3 check, and then king h2, knight f1, and then just trying to figure out where's the checkmate, or he's just happy to have a very good discovery after here, rook here check, and then here, and then there will be, let me see, is there any? Alright, so rook g3 is already on the board, and it has to be king, wait, there's also king f2, but if king f2, then check here, and after this then just knight e3. So Amin played king h1, and let's figure out on how to checkmate this, because it looks like it's kind of, oh yeah, of course, rook h3, king, and knight e3. Alright, so, and the players shook hands, and yeah, it's a win for Hikaru. Such a beautiful finish, because after this, if you go here, then there is a checkmate on f1. So yeah, but wow, actually, where did Amin do wrong in his position? Maybe he's a bit too ambitious with after f5, then f3, then at f6, then king f2, and e5. Maybe he forgot that there is this e5 move, because when you have to resort your knight back to h3, it's almost like the knight is not playing at all, and then black has an extra knight in this position. So instead of playing king f2, maybe it is best to actually, what to do in this position? Maybe f3 itself is a bit too ambitious. Yeah, maybe it is better to put the rook to the other side and then focus on playing on the other side. I believe this position is still pretty much equal. And yeah, but this is the nature of playing the rapid games. You don't really have much time to think through everything, and then you just have to go with your calculation and instinct as well. So that was done, and Hikaru won the game. Carson drew against Anand, and therefore Hikaru is still tailing behind Carson by half a point, and the next game will be played out in about, let me check actually, when is the next game? In about 30 minutes, so stay tuned while we're going to get ready for the next one, because Casablanca Chess variant, they're going to take positions from the past World Championship matches. So stay tuned while we're going to go on a break, and see you soon. Hello everyone, welcome back. Well, the players are still resting right now and they're going to choose one of the three positions for round number 5. We're going to analyze a little bit of the game, of the position that we saw for round number 4. It was coming from the game between Alexander Alekhine versus Max Euwe, from the World Championship match in Amsterdam, Netherlands, 1935. So it was taken from their game in round number 3 in the French defense with our variation. And just to compare how it went with the players, so this is starting position where here Anand chose to play knight e2, just like what Alekhine was playing as well. He also played knight e2 and knight bd7 and then knight g3, and here Magnus Carlsen chose to play queen a5. But if we want to watch or to see how the game ended and how the game went in the original game between Alekhine versus Max Euwe, is rook g6. Black played rook g6 followed by queen e3. I took a look at the game. It was such a beautiful and attacking game by Alekhine. So here after queen e3, knight d5, queen takes e4, knight takes c3, the game went with queen d3 and knight goes back to d5, and here bishop e2, queen f6, c3 takes on d4, takes on d4, and here black tried to develop the d7 knight to b6, bishop h5, rook goes to g7, and here bishop goes back to f3, and queen g6 offering the trade. And until the end of the game, white tried to keep the queen on the board. So bishop e4, f5, this is such a good provocation move, playing bishop e4, because now after f5 bishop goes back to f3 with the idea of attacking via h5, and king f8, a4, and rook c7 castles, and bishop d7. Well, this is, I would say this is a very unclear position. Materially speaking, it is of course equal, but I like white better here just because the king is much safer than the black's king. And also, well, the square of e5 looks like very tempting to be occupied by any of the pieces. So here white continued with bishop a3 check, king g8, a5 rook c3, and queen b1. So it's still setting up the threat over the knight on b6, and now knight jump to a4, and it's time to take this knight and take this pawn. So in this position, black kept offering the trade of the queens. Well, Alekhine decided to kind of like taking it, but he didn't want to capture the queen, of course, and instead he just played a6, so that if the queen is being captured, then I guess after in this position, rook goes to b8, and maybe we have a move like rook b8 here, and this is a preparation to go to d6. So yeah, and after in this position, yeah, black didn't take on the queen, so he just decided to play knight b6, and then bishop c5, f4, knight f5, and yeah, knight is not free here because the queen is hanging. And now king h8, just trying to step away from the possibility of the fork on e7, and after king h8, knight e7 still was played, and queen goes to e6, and now time to take on the b6, and then bishop c6. Yeah, it's very complicated actually. And after bishop c6, you just take on c6, and rook goes here. So it is a very common theme as well in this position. If you don't do anything in this position, let's say I just play one bad move like bishop takes a7. So the idea is plenty here. First of all, I think it's a direct attack to this one, check, check, and then check here maybe. And well, a draw is guaranteed. But if you want to play for a win, is it a possibility as well? Like maybe I'll just play queen h3 right away, and you cannot stop this mating idea. If you play g3, there is f3, and still queen g2 is the idea now. So yeah, so after rook g8, where's the rook? Let me check. Okay, rook g8 here. Knight e5 was played in order to stop any checks from f3 and g4. So maybe if this happens here, and then just step away with the king, and there is no more check. So that was the idea of knight e5. And here rook g7 was played, but now the position is pretty much clear for white. White can just play queen here, and this happens. So I'm just gonna move quicker, because in this position, after takes, okay, takes on d1, and the players, they kind of like agreed that this position is just won by white, because white has 2 extra pawns. Okay, so we have much ahead in schedule right now. The next game is going to start soon, so let me just put this for a bit, and I will just set it up very quickly. All right, welcome back. And yep, we already set the position right now. It looks like it's a very common position to play, especially in the modern chess, where white went with a double fianchetto bishops and coming from like a Reti/English type of position. So here knight bd7 is the last move, and this is going to be the starting position, and white is going to move. So for round number 5, Hikaru will be playing against Anand, and on the other board it is Carson will be playing against Amin Bassam. And oh, thanks for my mod. It's gonna be a game from Karpov versus Kasparov in the World Championship match, Seville 1987. So yep, and the player has shaken hands, and now we have a liftoff. The time has started. So yeah, white is currently thinking. You can pretty much go with any sort of ideas here. Like you can play queen c2. You are off choices here to play d3 or d4. You can also play in this position knight c3. So it's just going to depending on what sort of position and what sort of strategy that you like here as white. But this is a totally playable position. No wonder that the players voted to play this one, because this offers balanced chances for both sides. So in this position, Magnus chose to play queen e2, and let's take a look on the other board. What does Hikaru chose? And he also chose queen e2 idea, which is a very thematic idea too. You step away from this side of the board, and well, again, white is of choices to play d3 and d4 in the next move, followed by knight c3 or knight d2. So yeah, this is still very much a playable position. But in most cases, it's almost certain that this pawn will be moved to c5. And we're just gonna wait and see what the players are gonna play in this position in both. Yeah, in both position right now. Okay, one of them, Anand, has played c5 himself. What about Amin? Amin also played c5. Okay, and knight c3 has already been played, and you have to be a bit careful in this position. Usually without the knight on d7, black can play d4, but now with the inclusion of the knight on d7, d4 is no longer possible because you can just take twice and the knight can take it. And knight c3 is on the board, so this is offering like a very aggressive line because you want to set it up with the rook on d1 followed by d4 and then trying to hit the queen or maybe the other rook as well. So depending on what is the next move here, usually you want to put rook c8 here and maybe put the queen to c7 and b8. This is just one of the ideas on how to continue this position, and this is what Magnus is doing with knight c3. What about Hikaru? Hikaru moved rook d1. He really shows intention right after queen e2. So queen e2, c5, rook d1, and he's probably giving some time to choose where this knight will go. Or maybe as well at some of the position you might want to go to a3. I know it's looking like it's a very bad move, but of course it's depending on black's position. And now queen c7 is already played. I guess black is also setting up a position where the queen doesn't hit it to the rook immediately. So knight c3 is on the board. It's looking like almost the other position as well, but with the inclusion of rook c8. So let's take a look at Magnus's game. So knight c3 is still on the board, and here Amin is still thinking and still trying to decide which setup that he wants to go. Okay, things are getting interesting, of course. And now what's happening with the other board? Apparently it's still also a bit pausing here. After knight c3, Anand is still also trying to set up his strategy because the position is very dynamic. I know it's quite a closing position, but it offers so many ideas. Okay, and yeah, so the current standing, Magnus Carlsen is still leading with 3 points, and Hikaru Nakamura is just half a point behind him with 2.5, and Anand is now 1.5 point, and Amin Basam is still with 1 point. Okay, so let's come back to the game. So after knight c3, oh, Anand chose to put the rook on d8, not c8. So now, yeah, whenever things like this happen, the queen can always have the b8 square to go. And especially after rook c1, maybe eventually the queen will go to b8 too. Alright, so rook a d8 is on the board, and now white can choose to play d4, rook a c1, and Hikaru chose rook a c1 immediately. Okay, now if the queen doesn't move anywhere, d4 is going to be on the order. So queen b8 has moved, and this is a very thematic response to this type of position. And now maybe Hikaru can think whether it is time to take on d5 first followed by d4, or play d4 immediately, because it's a very thematic reaction to this position as well. If you take on d5, if takes on d5, and now you can push d4, or I think you can also play d4 immediately, and then if any takes like this, then you can have 2 pawns in the middle, which is equally good as well. So it's just up to his taste on how to deal with this position. So after queen b8, now Hikaru is still thinking. Let's move on to Magnus's game. And after knight c3, Amin Basam chose to play a6 not to allow knight b5 to happen, and now rook f d1. And after rook f d1, it is always a good idea to step away from the d file by playing queen c7 and then connect the rooks and probably put them on c8 and d8, and then the queen can somehow hide on b8 followed by queen a8. This is like a hiding spot for the queen and some of the positions, because, well, the knight on f3 is no longer protected by the pawn on e2, so this can be actually an attacking diagonal for the black pieces. So while Amin is still thinking of the rook fd1, let's come back to the game between Hikaru versus Anand. And Hikaru is still thinking also. He's still trying to decide what to do in this position, because apart from taking d5 and play d4, what else can black do in this position? Sorry, what else can white do in this position? Is d3 a possibility with the idea of e4? It's a little bit too passive, but this is quite an alternative. But I'm still on for d4. I think this is going to be a more aggressive move, and this is what white is needed in this position. And I just see on the live cameras there are some moves on the game between Carson versus Amin. So let's take a look at that. And what happened was, after a6, rook fd1, d takes c4, b takes c4, and queen c7. So this allow majority of pawns on the center for white by pushing d4 afterwards. But white has to also be careful not to push it too soon, because otherwise after takes and then rook c8, this pawn on c4 will be left hanging and kind of like weak. So we have to kind of delay with this idea, d4. But what other alternative? Maybe a preparation move like rook ac1 is very called for. So rook ac1 maybe is a good move in this position, and maybe rook c8 followed by rook d8. Still, up to certain moves, the position is still very much equal on both games. And yeah, both positions look very similar. The players taking two different approaches, and let's see which one is gonna play better. And let's take a look at the game between Hikaru versus Anand. Wow, knight h4. This is a very unique and very original move by Hikaru. It stops everything along this diagonal, and also additionally it wants to take on d5 and occupying f5 for the knight ladder. So yeah, how to deal in this position? Could it be like queen a8? I'm so down with this move. Queen a8, and then you're actually trying to attack this. Or alternatively, why don't we just take on c4 and offering this trade with the bishop? Isn't it a good trade for the black pieces? So yeah, I'm a bit torn about this move knight h4. It's very unique, but if I was just putting myself on Anand's shoes here, I would consider taking, or I would actually consider playing d4, because I think it's time to play in the center, not on the flank. So Anand is currently thinking, but I'm pretty sure he's gonna play one of these two moves. And do we have updated time? Yes, both players still have 11 minutes on the clock. And what did Anand just do? I think he took on d4, c4. Yes, he took on c4, because this is always a preferable trade to exchange your bishop with your opponent's fianchetto bishop. So dc4, bc4, and maybe we can come bishop g2, yes, and now maybe knight takes g2, and yes, so this already happened. Knight takes g2 is on the board, and looks to me black is quite comfortable already. Why black doesn't have any weaknesses in the center anymore. But how to continue this game? Like, one idea is to play knight e5 with any sort of attacking to d3 or to f3. But let's put it that way. Let's put the knight on e5, and maybe it is time to push d4. But after takes, the knight can be just sorted to g6. I think it should be just fine. And then these two, yeah, and then these two pawns in the center, I don't know how to feel about it. But instead of going knight e5, Anand just played a6. And what does it do? Is it trying to stop knight b5? But even after knight b5, there's nothing around there. Okay, so this idea of knight h4 And now Anand's idea by playing a6 is quite mysterious to me. So f4 is on the board right now. So maybe Anand already knew that Hikaru was just trying to play on the king side like this. So he is trying to prepare to make some counter attack on the queen side by playing a6, and potentially in the future it's gonna be b5. But immediate b5 is not really good here because the knight, the pawn, and the queen, they are eyeing on that side. Alright, so queen b7 is on the board. Maybe now it is also another preparation to play rook b8 so that you can push b5. So I think this is a very nice idea and very interesting as well, and instructive too, because when your opponent is playing on the king side, you are trying to distract it from the queen side. Alright, queen b7 is the last move in the on their game. Let's move on to the game between Magnus versus Armin Bassam, where it has been going quite calmly compared to the other board. So what happened was after bc4 and then queen c7, here Magnus played a4, rook f d8, d3, and rook a c8. So we can see from the setup by black, everything is solid, everything is so good, and white is also pretty much solid and equal. So now I think the battle of wits will start very soon. And now after rook a c8, where does Magnus going to play? Like, which side of the board? Is it the queen side, the center, or the king side? Or he's just going to mix all of the above. So maybe rook b1 here, followed by bishop a1, and then queen goes to b2. You kind of like having this battery over the g7 square. So this is one of the idea that I can think of. What could possibly be the other idea? I also like to play this e4, although it means that the knight will maneuver to b8, c6, and now to d4. So maybe it's better to keep all the pawns just like that for now. So what else can white play in this position? Wow, okay, this is still very much equal, and Magnus can play anything. Yeah, this position has so many alternatives and candidate moves. So meanwhile, let's move back to Hikaru versus Anand, because after queen b7 here, a4 was played. So Hikaru just stopped black's idea of playing b5 immediately, and now knight e4, trying to trade this knight so that there will be less guardian over the b5 square. So knight e4, how do we deal in this position? It looks like after queen f3 this knight is pinned, but maybe after this black can play knight here, and I think things should be fine. Black has to take into account about the possibility of g5, g4 and g5. So but maybe after g4 you can just simply play rook d7, and after this you can just take on c3 like this. So knight e4 is still on the board, and yeah, Hikaru is still thinking. And I just see from the live cam there's some moves in the game between Magnus versus Armin Bassam. So let's take a look at that one. So they pretty much use the same idea, both Magnus and Hikaru, but instead after rook a c8 playing knight h4 like what Hikaru did, Magnus took another route of the knight going to e1, but after the trade he take it back with the knight. Okay, so yeah, so both players still have 7 minutes and 10 minutes. This is quite surprising that now Armin has more time than Magnus. So let's switch back to the other one, and wow, what am I just seeing? So after knight e4, Hikaru, instead of attacking, he went with knight b1. I'm trying to understand the idea behind it. So knight d6 is already played, so presumably d3 will happen at any point anyway. So before d3 happened, Anand just moved back the knight to d6 and stepping away from the center like that. So now d3, and the knight will, I think, maneuver to d2 followed by f3, and yeah, maybe the knight is standing better on f3. But what to do with the other knight? I'm just a bit confused where this knight should go. Alright, maybe the other game will give us a clear idea on how to deal in the position. So in the Magnus's game, oh wow, so now we have some attacking idea on the king's side with the pawn storm. Oh, alright, so after knight takes g2, knight e5, not sure what does it do, or maybe it's just maneuvering to c6. So f4, knight c6, and now we have g4 on the board. So now if black doesn't do anything, I think g5 will be in order. So, but you don't want to play anything like h6 as well, because it's just going to weaken the position around your king. And if h6 is not your candidate move, then how to proceed in this position? Because after g5, then your knight has to go back, unless you play g6 in this position, and then you can put the knight on h5. Maybe this is fine. It looks like it's a bit scary because of this open diagonal, but you can always convert your bishop to f8 and to g7, and this might be just it. So g4 is still on the board, and Amin is still thinking on how to deal against this attack that Magnus has on the king side. He played rook d7. So he just pretty much ignore about g5, and then he will just put the knight on e8, but at the same time he's preparing this attack toward the d3 square. So rook d7 is still on the board, and let's come back to Hikaru versus Anand game, because it has been simplified quite significantly on the queen side. And what just happened after knight b1, knight d6, d3, and b5? This knight d6 move allow everything to play b5, ab, ab, cb, and queen takes b5. And knight from g2 finally goes to e1, and then rook b8 is there trying to attack the bishop. And after rook b8, rook c2, protecting the bishop. Rook fc8, and now how do we feel about this position? Black is doing totally fine. There's almost no weakness in this position. In fact, I think black has more space advantage on the queen side. So it's really, yeah, it's really confusing me how Hikaru has played this out, because this is not how he usually plays. We know that he is a very aggressive player, but now black has all the initiatives. But okay, this might be too early to call it, because anything can still happen in the next 15 minutes. Both players still have 8 minutes and 7 minutes respectively. So knight d2 is already on the board, and it is about to go to f3. But again, we can tell from just the pawn formation, this pawn formation or pawn structure that white has, it allows the king on g1 to be exposed. So in a hindsight, black is standing better, not only because of the space advantage, but also in the long-term thinking about the king's safety. And bishop f6 is already moved, and I think this is a very good decision by Anand. He might just be about to score his first win, because he has scored just 3 draws so far, and now the bishop has been traded. e4, get ready of this e5. It is a fork, but obviously Anand will not miss it. So what do we do in this position? Maybe move the knight elsewhere. Yes, knight goes back to d7. So now if you play e5, the knight will jump to f5, and then followed by knight d4 is going to be quite dangerous. Black is totally in the driver's seat here. So Hikaru has to be very, very careful not to blunder or do any mistake, because black is controlling everything on the queen side and some of the center. So now, how to make a further improvement in white's position? I'm afraid black is so ready for anything, and now Hikaru just double up the rook on the c file, and it would be quite a dream if black can move one of the knights to d4. This is such a dream square for the knight. So, but now black has to be ready. There might be some follow-up attack to the c5, but okay, the knight on d7 is controlling everything. Maybe it is time to shuffle this queen. This queen looks really good, but it doesn't really do anything on b5. And maybe it is best to put the rook in front, not the queen in front. So what do we do in this position? I like to step away. Oh, okay, step away with the queen immediately to a6. I just, yeah, I was not sure where the queen has to move, but I'm pretty sure the queen has to move. It has to be the rook who is in front of the other pieces. So queen a6 has been moved, and maybe, this is also a very good idea to combine the other idea. The knight will go to b5 with the idea to d4. So stepping away with the queen, giving the square for the knight to improve even further. And now knight f3, trying to protect the d4 square ahead. And yeah, so okay, this is still a very good position for black. And yeah, Anand is trying to think about it. And let's update ourselves on the game between Carson versus Amin here, because what happened after rook d7, Carson also tried to double up the rook on the d file, rook c d8, rook a d1, and here knight b4. This is such a good outpost for the knight, and here knight e1 and e5. So for those who are not very familiar with Amin Bassam here, he is an Egyptian grandmaster. He's Egypt #1, and he has won many tournaments. I think the last one being the African Games, and he is the first African player who ever crossed 2700. And on top of it, he's a doctor. So doctor is his day job, but besides it, well, he's just a very strong player. So e5 is already on the board, and f5 has moved, and now, wow, white is just attacking the king side, but also you have to notice that the knight on b4 stands very strongly attacking d3. So d3 will forever be a weakness unless you play something like e4 followed by knight d5. So it's kind of like quite an idea to play after this, right? Because now after e5 it allows d5 to be the outpost for the knight. So imagine this happen. Let's say black plays something like this, and now we can continue by playing e4, and knight d5 is going to come soon. So did it just happen? It just happened. So h6 and e4. Oh my gosh, I'm not trying to be a clairvoyant here, but it just happened. So e4, because the idea is you just want to put the knight on d5 and stopping everything, stopping all the pressure over your pawn on d3. So this is very important to neutralize the attack to your weakness point. And after you neutralize this, you can switch all your pieces back maybe to the king side, and then start another pawn storm here and attack. So knight has moved back to c6 with the idea to put it on d4, and now it is the time to play knight d5. Carson hasn't moved yet, but I'm pretty sure this is what he's going to play. So both players still have about 5 minutes left on the clock, and Magnus is still leading half a point ahead of Hikaru. So well, he's still thinking right now, and maybe while he's still thinking, let's still the moment to look at the other game between Hikaru versus Anand. And just after knight e3, he played h6, a little move to save your back rank in the future. Then after g4, rook goes to d8. So here it's well, everything is still under control, but I just want to come back to the game between Magnus versus Amin. because here after knight c6, Magnus hasn't moved yet, and hopefully he moves soon, because you cannot be too far behind your opponent's clock. And he looks like he's ready to move. Could it be knight d5, or could it play something else? Maybe also like h4 with the idea of g5. Okay, so he still hasn't moved yet. Wow, surprisingly. So he has spent like 2 minutes on the clock for the next move. What could he be thinking? So if we play knight d5, takes, and maybe knight d4, and maybe he's not happy with this current position, because then the bishop can just go like this. So this might be is the reason. When the bishop is centralized like this, you don't really have an entry point. So maybe you have to delay knight d5 after all. But what to do with this idea of knight d4? No, he played knight d5, so what could it be? So after knight takes d5, this is a must, and maybe it's good, or it's better to take it with this pawn instead of the c pawn. No, he still take it with the c pawn as he should, but now knight d4 might be coming. It hasn't moved yet, but I'm pretty sure this is going to be the move. There's no better square for the knight to go apart from the d4 square. And maybe after knight d4, you don't need to take it with the bishop, but instead you just move the queen. But again, if you move the queen, then there is this bishop g4, bishop g5, so you have to take it. And Magnus took it. And after this, it is best to take it with the e pawn, because after that, the queen's diagonal is open, and the bishop can just centralize on e5 and enjoying all the dark squares. Armin is still thinking after bishop takes d4, but even if he take it with the c pawn as well, it is not too bad. It is equally good, but he took it with the e pawn as he should. So he is trying to undermine all the dark squares with his bishop on e7. So it's gonna go to d6 or to f6 and centralizing on e5. So that is why Magnus Carlsen thought for quite some time there. He's trying to work it out in the resulting position on how to continue. So rook b1 is already on the board, and now the pressing point will be the pawn on b6, and he's going to reroute his knight maybe somewhere like this and have an outpost on c4, and that is how he will encounter the activity of this dark square bishop. So rook b1 is still on the board, and Armin is still thinking. And now let's switch back to the other game between Hikaru versus Anand. And now what happened after knight c4? He played knight f8 and then rook a2, queen b7, and g5 takes. So presumably now taking with the h pawn like this, yes. And now you just want to build your major pieces on the h file, trying to give a checkmate along the h file. Alright. So now the situation has changed a bit. Now Hikaru got what he wanted, that is the attack on the king's side. So what do we do about it? How to make a counter-attack as black in this position? Could it be knight d4 and offering this trade with this knight? Because this knight could potentially be a dangerous knight as well if it jumps to e5, for example. What else? So knight g6. Okay, trying to attack this pawn on f4. And what to do in this position? Like if we play queen e3, trying to protect the pawn, then maybe this queen will come to c7 and then try to attack it even more. And if you play something like this, e5, then black will be very happy, because then after this maybe takes, and you're still attacking this. So this is quite a double-edged decision by Hikaru. At one point he's attacking, but on the other point, well, it's going to be very dangerous for his king on g1. So if the attack doesn't work, then it's just going to kill his position. But of course, if the attack works, then it works. So knight g6 is on the board, and yeah, how do we deal with this threat on f4? And what did he do? He just played knight f e5. So what is the idea of knight f e5? So knight takes here, and then what? Even if you play something like this, the pawn on f7 is protected by the queen, so it should be fine. And is there any hiding point in this position? Even after this, maybe maybe this is what he wanted to play, and then put the rook over here, and then the queen on h3. So it's gonna be quite a dynamic position, because we cannot really tell who is going to attack. Like looks like black is going to attack, but okay, the resulting position, it is only white is attacking. All right, so let's say I still want to grab this one, but after queen f3, maybe I have to think a bit slower here, but I don't see any other square for the knight apart from g6. So if Anand took the pawn, he has to be ready for that resulting position. Knight g6, takes, and rook h2, and suddenly the king on g8 is under attack. So maybe it is wise not to take on f4. But if it's not knight takes f4, what could it be? Maybe just take on e5. Takes on e5, and then knight d4. But this rook stands really nice because it stops the queen from penetrating to the second rank. And now maybe after knight d4, the queen can go to h5 followed by rook h2. And wow, what an attack we have here as white. So after knight f e5, you really have to be careful not to lose this. This is such an interesting idea by Hikaru, trying to mud the water and forces Anand to think. And we just saw from the live cam that Anand just shakes his head. Okay, let Anand think for a bit on this position while we are going to switch. Oh, Anand just moved something, and what did he do? He played knight d4 right away. But after knight d4, I think queen. Oh, that is very tricky. If you play queen here, then there is knight f4. See? Yep, so this is something that you should try to avoid maybe. But what are the alternatives apart from queen h5? Looks like Hikaru is reaching his queen, and he's moved it to e3, trying to protect the pawn on f4 like that. Okay, so while this is still on the board, let's also switch. Oh, okay, Anand just took the knight, and how to take it back? Probably with the other knight, yes. And then now it is time for this rook to switch over the other side. So knight c6. Isn't it just g6 right now? It feels like this g6 is going to happen at some point. Or I think it's also a good idea to keep the knight alive. So maybe knight here, maybe, or knight c4. It's also fine. No, now I like white's position, because it looks like the king is kind of like alone in this back rank, and it's just bound to happen. This rook h2, queen h3 at some point in the future. Wow, it's gonna be very dangerous. While this one is still, while Hikaru is still thinking, let's switch to Carson versus Amin, because let's understand what is going on. So after rook b1, rook b8 was played, and double up the rook, and bishop d8. So where is the activity with the bishop? So takes, rook d6, and knight c4, rook switches to h6, and now Magnus is overing the trade, and I don't think Amin should take this trade, because I think black is left worse after the queen trade. So, but alternatively, where does the queen go? It has to go somewhere that is not. Yeah, I'm wondering where. Actually, if you move it back to c7, maybe d6 is the move. And if you give a check over here, maybe this is the move. And yeah, it's kind of like tricky right now, because this pawn on d5 is becoming strong. And if this happens, what to do in this position? Maybe king h1 followed by rook g1 and attacking g7. This is possible. But one thing for sure, Amin shouldn't take the queen and should just keep playing some aggressive or tactical idea. But on the second thought, if the queen takes here and rook takes here, let's say, and rook takes here, this position is also totally playable because everything is under control. But wow, I mean, just looking at his clock, and he should be worrying about his clock because he only has 20 seconds left on the clock. So he still hasn't moved yet. Oh, he finally took the queen on f2 just to get rid of all this complication. And after that, king takes f2, rook takes h5, and I think the king has to move in order to protect the pawn on h2, and Magnus moved it to g3. And this is just gonna be, doesn't it look quite dangerous? But fortunately, after bishop c7, there's d6. So here Amin played g6 in order to clarify the king side like that, and hoping that he can bring the rook via b7 to the other side of the board should the pawn on g6 be taken. So fg6 already on the board, and I think fg6 will follow suit. But Amin is still thinking. I'm really worried about his time management here. So he took finally, yeah. And now, yeah, now it's quite tricky on how to deal with this position, because this pawn is also right now hanging. So Magnus must be thinking whether or not he can take this pawn. But if the knight is already moved like this, then it's time for the bishop to give a check and maybe bring the king like this and put the rook on h8. So and therefore Magnus didn't take it. He played d6 first, because this check along this diagonal is going to be quite dangerous to the white's king. So d6 he's already played, and Amin literally bring his rook now to b7 because he needs this rook for the attack on the king side. And Magnus is still thinking now, but Magnus has more time on the clock than Amin. Amin only has 27 seconds left. So now how to deal with this type of attack, because this rook will come to h7 and then there will be rook h3. So Magnus pushes the pawn to e5, and presumably it is going to be his hiding spot on d5. Just imagine the position after rook here and then king f3, and then whenever you take or give a check, the king will go here and d5. So this is actually very, very tricky, and therefore after e5, Amin played rook f7, trying to stop the king from entering the other side of the board. And after rook f7, what does Magnus do? He just played king g2, so stepping away from any possible checks like bishop h4 perhaps. And now when the king is rook goes back to h7, we can expect king f3, king e4, and king d5 will happen. Magnus is still currently thinking, but he has to step away with the king, because this rook h2 is gonna happen. Or if he wants to play a safe chess, he can also move it to g1 and then keep an eye on every single thing on the board. So just wondering which one that he's gonna pick. And he played king g1, so he doesn't want to play any sort of complication. King g1 will also seal the deal. You can move the rook back to g2, and king just moved to f7. And now maybe it is time to play rook g2 and then follow rook f1 later. So the position is very much safe for white in this one, and black has to be careful with these two pass pawns on the center. So yeah, while Magnus is still thinking, let's switch to the other game, because it looks like it is almost drawn. Okay, it is almost drawn. We can come back to this game later, and then let's continue looking at Magnus's game. And alright, rook f1 is on the board. Now where does the king go? The king goes to e6. And what happened now if the rook double up on f6? And Magnus has to think about this idea with b5. So rook f8, trying to attack this bishop. So where does this bishop go? If the bishop went to g5, you might actually think about grabbing this pawn. So bishop g5 is already on the board, And oh, you cannot really grab this pawn now because this is also hanging. But what else can you do in this position? Can you just give a check first? Okay, this is now quite dangerous. But white is totally winning because of these two pawns. But Magnus has to just pick the safest continuation and not to blunder anything, because this bishop can be quite tricky in the end as well, because it has many checks on a3, for example, and this rook on b2 has to keep guarding the pawn on h2. So now with 14 seconds left on the clock, okay, king d7, and where does the rook go? It can go to the other side of the board actually, and then try to trade one of the rooks, because if you trade one of the rooks, the position has become simpler for you. Okay, instead of a8, Magnus chose to play rook b8, also in a way trying to not only check but also take it with the rook. And check and king h1. What happened after king? Oh, what happened after bishop f4? There's just check on b7 and trade the rooks, and then you're gonna take this pawn. So Amin has to do something, and he played king e6, stepping away from the check on the 7 rank. And okay, what's next now? King e6 is on the board, and can you take? Yeah, you can totally take that. And then after bishop f4, this actually might happen on the board, bishop f4, because try to find out what else can you do in this position as black. You don't really have that enough resources to keep continuing the game. So, but he didn't do that. He played rook f7, trying to give a check over here and check over here later on. So do we stop this check? If we do, oh, this might be it. d7 is the move, and he did it. Yeah, you cannot take it because of e6. So Amin played king e7, but now I think you can just stop this by playing rook f6. He didn't do that. He did d8, check, take and check here. Oh, this is a very safe way to trade the rook. So the king has to go anywhere on the 7th rank, and the rook will come again here and grab this one. Or maybe even better. So king here, check, and here. Alright, so this has happened. What? Alright, so the moves are coming so quickly. Okay, check, king e7, check here, and Amin lost the rook. And after king d5, he just pretty much grabbed this rook on f7. What a game by our world number 1, Magnus Carlsen. In such a position, he can turn it around and play in both sides, left and right, and now he is still maintaining his lead, and by 1 point again, because Hikaru drew his game. And yeah, so this is such a, both are such a nice games, and they have 2 different outcomes. So let's also see what happened in the game between Hikaru versus Anand, because we kind of like left it. So we saw the position after knight fe5, and after this takes, oh sorry, oh, this is actually a mistake. What's happening? Queen e3 is a mistake because queen g4 is best. Okay, takes here, and knight c6 and knight g4. So I put my eval bar on just to see if there is any like up and down, but it looks like everything went smoothly for both sides. And after the trade of the queens, there's nothing much happening on the board. Maybe takes here, takes, and okay, this is pretty much equal here. And then there's another trade of the rook here, and then takes, and takes this, takes that, and then that's it, and it is a draw. Okay, so we didn't miss much on that game. So let's take a look again at Magnus's game, because it was quite a show. It was very entertaining, and I'll just put my eval bar again just to see where both players made kind of like their mistakes or something. So okay, rook here, knight here, queen f4, everything looks good. Okay, I don't like this decision by playing rook b8. Maybe it is necessary, but I just like to get my bishop into action. But okay, the computer said just rook b8 was fine. And after this, bishop f6. Yeah, bishop d8 is a bit too passive. Bishop f6, and then let's say king g2, rook e7 like that. Yeah, let's get this knight to this side of the board if it's possible. Oh, and c4. So this might be missed then. Takes and then d3. Oh, rook b e8. Ah, this idea. Wow, this is such a nice idea. You want to attack the center. You also have this decoy by playing c4. So setting up for that idea is so nice. And you shouldn't holding on to the b6 pawn for too long, because if you keep doing that, then black is just gonna be passive. Because to be honest, I like black's position. I like the prospect of the dark square bishop, because it has just all the diagonals that it needs to be better. But obviously don't put it on the passive square like d8. So bishop f6 is definitely a better way to go. But again, this is rapid game, and it's very hard to make such a call when you are short on time. So after bishop d8, Magnus played knight f3, and then queen f4, and after this h5 takes, and then rook here. And now white is already better, because knight is already on c4 right now. It is a very good position for the knight. And after rook h6, queen f2, yeah, I was just trying to check if Magnus actually gave any chances to Amin in this position. So king g3, g6, and fg. So this is kind of like a mistake, because here Magnus should have just closed the position by playing f6. And if this taken, of course, you can just grab this b6 pawn. And additionally, after f6, you are setting up e5 next move. So this is actually what white should have played, but fg6 is also fine. White still maintains the advantage. Takes and d6. It's also, I thought it was a good move, but turns out this is a bit dubious. So king has to move to g2. Okay, but at this point, 2 minutes left on the clock. D6 looks like a good practical choice. Alright, so D6, rook here, here, and here. This is such a mistake, because alright, so after king g2 here and here. Oh, take a look at this position. White should have played e6, allowing this, but then the king just moved up. So again, the king has this hiding spot on the light square. So king f3, and that should have been what happened. But okay, instead Magnus chose a safe option by playing king g1, and then king f7. This is actually a blunder. Oh my gosh, you can just see the default bar from +2 to be just 000 by playing this move. So king e6 was the right move. Okay, rook f8, and here instead of playing the bishop, black should have just tried to trade the rook, because apparently these pawns are stuck, and the king is just on time on e6 to stop both of them. So if you trade something like this, well, this is equal. But again, it's so hard to make a judge like this. So let's continue with knight b6 maybe. Bishop takes b6, and then rook takes b6, and rook h5. Wow, so in this position d7, and then you just have to take, and rook takes a6. So this is going to be like a drawn rook end game if it happens. So bishop g5 is double question mark, and this is a mistake, because instead of, okay, white should have taken on b6, but Magnus did this one first and followed by this, which I think is equally good. And after this just takes this, and this is another mistake. So Amin has been playing on increment, so, and he totally didn't see this one again, and then soon after this sequence, Magnus sealed the deal and won this rook and also won the game. So it's going to be very interesting going toward the last round because I think we have an early schedule too for the last round. We will see the players very soon, and it's going to be the games will be Hikaru versus Carson. Wait, Carson versus Hikaru, because on the first one it was Hikaru versus Carson, and Amin will play against Anand, and that matchup will be very interesting too because Carson is currently leading by 1 point ahead of Hikaru. So I don't know if Hikaru could beat Hikaru could beat Magnus. What's gonna happen? Are they going to play a playoff, or would there be any sort of tiebreaker? We will see, but for sure it's gonna be always interesting to see the game between Carson versus Hikaru. While we're getting ready for the next one, I will have a very quick break and we will reconvene in a few minutes. So stay tuned and see you soon in a few minutes. Hello, welcome back everyone, and we are going to see the last round of the Casablanca Chess variant, a very unique format, including four of our top players representing their own continent. Magnus Carlsen representing the European continent, Hikaru Nakamura, North American, Vishwanathan Anand, Asian, and Amin Bassam, African. So here I think the players are going to get ready for this last round of the event, and be reminded again, the players will have 15 minutes plus 10 seconds on the clock, and the games or the position will be selected by two panels, the commentators, that's Grandmaster Fresina Laurent and Grandmaster Hisham Hamdouchi from Morocco. So here we have our world number one seated already, and he's gonna get white pieces against Hikaru Nakamura, and on the other board Anand Vishwanathan will take white pieces against Amin Bassam. So for the current standing, Carson is 1 point ahead of Hikaru, and he just needs a draw to win the title. And I'm not sure what's happening right now in the playing hall, because the players, they kind of like come and go. We saw Amin Bassam before, and Hikaru, and now Carson, and then now they're gone again. But yeah, I'm pretty sure they will coming back to the chair in a few minutes, and we're gonna get started with the last round. And I think that should be Anand coming to his chair. Yes, and he just seated. Yeah, what is going on? Because Amin was there, he seated and he went. Hikaru as well, and then Carson as well, and now Anand is now seated, and is he going to go like the rest of the players? Or maybe this is actually, maybe they make it public right now, how the players are voting for the upcoming position, because usually for the first 5 rounds it's kind of like discreet, but now I think this is from my own judgment. They're handed the paper, and then they just have to choose which one, or they vote which one, and then the player come and go like that. And now Anand went. So yes, so they make the selection of the last position public, and not like discreet anymore. So apparently the chief arbiter is announcing, is going to announce which position to be played out based on the number of votes, and we're going to have the players coming back to the hall soon. And yep, this is the last round, and it decides everything, especially the matchup between Hikaru versus Carson. It's 3:20 a.m. from where I stream right now in Indonesia. For my love of chess, I love doing this commentary, and especially when there is an event that involves Magnus Carlsen, Hikaru Nakamura. You cannot just miss it. I was thinking, like, if I wasn't commentating, maybe I would stay up and watch the games myself. So it's always a joy to watch these top players play, even though this is some sort of like a variant that quite new. But but it's very instructive, because it is also giving us the understanding of how the chess from many years ago compared to the modern chess, because because sometimes the players have obviously different approaches in playing out the moves. Okay, so apparently the position has been chosen, and now they're waiting for the players to come back. And there you see Hikaru just taking his chair, and followed by other players. Bossum, Anand, and Magnus himself. Okay, so they're going to be handed the paper of the moves that's gonna play. Let's take a look. The moves will come up soon on the board. And it looks like it is a Sicilian. Oh, it's a Victor Rouser Sicilian, or the classical. Yeah, alright, this is gonna be interesting. We will have Sicilian on the board. Okay, this is quite a famous kind of like a famous variation. Is this the... Alright, I think this is the position, yeah? Okay, the other board has been moving quite slowly compared to the board between Magnus versus Hikaru. Okay, they'll be given like some time before the start of the clock, and after the shake hand letter we can see the start of the game. So this is the starting position, and this is white to move. So here Magnus and Anand, they have to make their moves. Let's actually see it from the start quickly. So yeah, this is the Ritter Rouser, the classical one with F4 variation, takes. Yeah, back in the day, yeah, this is one of the main lines. So E5, D5, and then King B1, and then Queen here, and F5. Okay, so usually, if I'm not mistaken, you just want to play Bishop E2, and Black shouldn't allow the Bishop to go to H5. So if it happens, Black has to play H5 himself to stop it. Apart from that, I think the Queen will go to A5 or to C7, and then you just play on the Queen side. The King is not necessarily castled. The King can just stay in the center, and yeah, this is actually a very rich position, but I would prefer to play as Black in this position. So maybe, I don't know, maybe this is just a personal preference. If it's really better for Black, then Hikaru is on advantage in this position then. I just like the fact that Black has a pair of bishops, and everything looks very safe for the King as well. And if you can tell from this position, right, only Black can try to attack the King. So that's something that White must take into account. Alright, yeah, so this is a very important position, right? So Magnus is now thinking we're going to focusing mainly on this one, but of course we will keep switching to the other board as well. And apparently Anand has moved. And so let's see what he's done. He's played knight e2. So this is also a very thematic play to play knight e2, because the knight has no use being on c3 anyway. You can move it to d4. You can I think it's pretty much to d4, yeah, and then just to stop anything to do with bishop c5, because you can always overprotect the knight on d4. So this is what Anand has chosen. I'm still also waiting for Magnus's move in this position, and he has a totally different approach. He played g4, giving up this pawn for initiative. So let's take a look. What happened after f takes g4? If f takes g4, then maybe you can follow this up by playing h3, and you just try to open up the file, the h file here, so that you can attack the h7 pawn. Alright, so f takes g4 is already on the board, so I'm just expecting h3 to happen, because if you're going to be consistent about this sacrifice or gambit with the g4, then yeah, h3 is already then. Then now, if you're kind of like taking it, rook takes, bishop goes to d3, this rook goes to h1, and you have this attack over h file. So we see two different approaches. Anand has approached this game with a very classical manner. He just being very principled, knight e2, going to d4, and so on. But here Carson has a totally direct approach. He just sacrificed this pawn, followed by another sacrifice on h3. So he will be left with one pawn less for sure, but it will ensure him an attack over the king side. So yeah, I'm wondering what's gonna happen with Hikaru. We suddenly lost the live cam of the, yeah, not sure what's happening with the live cam from the playing hall. It was kind of frozen, but I guess yeah, there's nothing. I don't think it's something to do with Lichess. I think on our end it's fine, but it's just the feed that we have from the playing hall. The camera seems to be frozen, and they're just kind of trying to reboot it. Yeah, yeah, so let's try to enjoy the game then. So g takes h3 has already played, and now if I understand this position correctly, you're just gonna play rook takes h3, and we have our live cams back. Yeah, rook takes h3, and then you want to play bishop d3 followed by rook h1 then. Yeah, so you just want to attack from the side, and since Magnus is already 1 point ahead of Hikaru, a draw is what he needs to win the tournament. So queen c7 is already on the board, and what to do in this position? If we continue with our plan, bishop d3 is nice. But maybe after bishop d3 is just long castle. And after this, oh, there might be this move, takes, and bishop c6. So this might be the counter attack. So, okay, Magnus has to be careful then. Maybe after bishop d3 castles, it's time to move the knight to e2 like this, and stopping d4. Yeah, so shouldn't hurry too much about it. Meanwhile, queen c7 is still on the board, and let's take a look and update ourselves on the game between Anand versus Amin. And what happened was, okay, it looks quite similar, even though Anand started it with knight e2, b4, queen f3, queen b6, and then g4. F takes g4, queen takes g4, and this is the current position. I think I prefer the other position before, because with this one, the rook on h1 is not really active yet. So after queen takes g4, maybe I will consider long castle, and yeah, putting one of the rooks on the g file, and I think black should be fine. Apparently Magnus is still thinking. Yeah, apparently Magnus is still thinking, and sorry. Let's take a look at his game again. So after queen c7, yeah, he's still calculating what to do. It is an important game right now because it's the decider of the tournament who's going to be the winner. Okay, Magnus is still thinking, while on the other game there are some moves already. Alright, so after queen takes g4, Amin just castled and queen h5 is on the board. So now, how to deal with this attack? Yeah, you can actually put bishop here with the idea of f5. I think this is fine. Yeah, black is totally nice here. Like the position is very harmonious. Like yeah, with this pair of bishop, but Amin didn't play that. He played f5. So, oh, of course, yeah, this en passant would just be beneficial for black, because then the bishop is attacking the king. So f5, such a nice move. You're not really worried of anything. So let's put this as a main line, and I see, has Magnus played? No, after queen c7 he still hasn't played. Yeah, there's this idea with d4 and b4, so you have to be careful about this. I think he might be thinking about f5 now. Like if f5, then maybe b4. And if this one, then take with the other pawn. Like this. And maybe, oh, how do we do with this? Takes and e6. Ooh, and bishop here. Yeah, I'm not sure about this. I mean, this should be better for black, yeah. So I was just playing around with the pieces, so maybe that sacrifice didn't work. But the starting move with f5 is, yeah, it should be interesting. It's just that after f5 and then b4, and then what to do in this position. Yeah, alright. Wow, so Magnus still thinking, and he's gone down to 7 minutes and 40 seconds. It's a lot of time. But he finally decided to play queen g1. Queen g1. So alright, so queen g1 is a preparation in case that black decided to castle. Then this might happen. Knight takes b5, a takes b5, and then rook c3, because now there is no more bishop c5 thanks to the queen on g1. And if bishop goes to c6, then there is this bishop takes b5. But this is actually a doable position, because after this maybe, oh, okay, very tricky. There's queen a7, and then this bishop is lost. Okay, so queen g1 is a very good preventing move against castle. And also at the same time, it's stepping away from any sort of fork on d4. And now what to do if b4 happens? Yeah, if b4 happens, like, do you just step away like this, knight d2, knight e2, and then after castles, then knight d4? Yeah, maybe this is just the spot for the knight. So Hikaru is still thinking, and there's already some moves on the other board. So let's take a look. And what happened was f5. Oh, not this f5, the other f5. And then rook g1, a5, rook g7, and bishop f8 takes on h7 and taking it twice. And now, so Amin has sacrificed that h pawn with a hope that he can attack the king, but apparently the king is pretty safe here, so maybe white can just focus on pushing the h pawn. Also, what's wrong with this might be an idea to play knight d4, because this is not really hanging. If this happens, then knight takes e6, and if this taken, then bishop here, and it's gonna be mate soon. King has to go here, and queen b7. So queen f2, I like the idea of knight d4 right away, because again after this and this, let's say you're trying to attack the rook like this, but I can just, where can I go? Maybe just step away like this should be fine. This will never be able to capture by the bishop. So, oh, he did. Anand played knight d4. So how is the standing? Anand is 1/2 and Hikaru is 2.5. So if Hikaru lost and Anand won, they will have the same score. Yeah, knight d4 is such a good move, and Amin, we can see from the live cam, he just totally missed this idea of knight e6 followed by bishop a6. Yeah, I think it's almost GG now, because yeah, black doesn't have any more follow-up ideas. And let's quickly take a look what Magnus just did. So after queen g1 b4 happened, but instead of retreating it to e2, he played queen g7 attacking the rook, and after rook f8, now knight e2. So he did this inclusion with the queen and rook c8, and maybe now it's time to play knight d4. Yeah, maybe knight d4, and after bishop c5, maybe just try to hold this pawn with rook h2. This hasn't happened yet, but apart from this one, what else can be done? Okay, rook c8. Again, when you put this type of rooks, it's quite double-edged. Now the king is forced to be in the center, and the knight can be quite tricky. It can somehow check the king by surprise. All right. Magnus is still thinking, and he's down with 7 minutes now on the clock. And he did something. He removed something. So I think it's knight d4 and then bishop c5. Yes, exactly. So knight d4, bishop c5, and now Magnus has to stop the queen from taking on c2 later on. So maybe just step back with the rook like this, rook h2. He's still thinking, or also you can grab this pawn. Queen takes h7, and then it is also protecting the pawn on c2. Yeah, I wonder what Magnus will decide in his position. He has 7 minutes, and Hikaru still has 10 minutes, so Hikaru is still up on the clock. Okay, still no move yet from Magnus. Alright, let's try to think what could be wrong in this position if rook h2 is done. He took on h7. Okay, so queen takes h7 is already on the board, and yeah, now if takes and takes, and maybe his ward of queen here going to g1. This might be, oh, queen c5, actually, queen c5. Bishop takes, rook takes, and then queen c5. Just trying to play some counter attack like that. And yeah, this rook has to go. Maybe back to d1. And then all these pawn moves there. a5, a4, and so on. Yeah, so maybe black is fine. But queen h7 is still the last move on the board. And on the other game, after knight d4, there was still the last move on the board as well. Amin hasn't moved yet, and the position was just losing already. So we're going to focus on this one. This is the decider matchup. Who's going to win the tournament? And what happened was, yeah, bishop takes d4, rook takes d4 as expected, and we're going to expect as well queen c5 followed by all these pawn moves with a5 and a3. Sorry, a5 and a4. Yep, and queen c5 is already played by Hikaru. So rook might go to d1, and then we can play a5. And black is attacking the king on b1, while black's king itself on e8 looks like pretty safe. While on the other position, oh, queen f2 is already there. So instead of, oh, I see. So this is the move that Magnus was not happy about. So queen f2 is already played, and well, the queen is still guarding c2, so we don't have to worry about it yet. But how to stop the queen from taking f4? And I think the other game is about to finish. So after knight d4, queen takes f4 and knight takes e6. Yeah, this is what we discussed earlier. Queen takes e5, then give a check first, and instead of grabbing the rook, because if you take the rook here, there might be like bishop g7, and it's gonna be, yeah, maybe still winning for black, but you have to deal with all of these attacks. Like you have to play c3 in fact in this position, and it's just who's going to win in this position. Like if takes this one, and with the idea of c2 and then grab queen b2. So Anand didn't want to deal anything about it. So after king b8, he just grabbed the bishop instead of the rook. And after knight takes f8, yeah, Amin is now still thinking obviously that if rook takes here, white can just safely take on d7. But if black didn't take the if black didn't take the knight, then it's just winning for white, and Amin resigned. So Anand is currently on the sheer second place. It would be depending on the other game on how Hikaru going to finish this one. If Hikaru loses, then both Hikaru and Anand will share the second place. But if Hikaru at least draw, then Hikaru will be on the second position outright. And if Hikaru wins, then he will share the first place with Magnus Carlsen. So now after queen f2, Magnus took a very big risk here on taking the pawn on a6. Alright, so bishop takes a6, and now what could be the move in this position? So if the rook steps away from the c file, it looks like it's fine. If it goes here, bishop goes here, and maybe this is the idea, queen a7, and you are attacking a2. So what to do then? If rook goes to a8, you cannot move your bishop because after queen a7, then a2 might be weak. So maybe in this position, oh no, it's go back to f1 again. It's fine because after queen a7, there's a3. This rook on h3 is protecting it. Alright, so bishop a6 is still the last move on the board, and now Hikaru is still thinking on how to play out this position. What else can he do in this one? Let's play something else. Yeah, I still like rook a8 because it's like a direct attack anyway, but okay, bishop f1. Okay, how to continue? Can black take the pawn on f4? Looks very tempting. And then how to continue this? Maybe rook b3. And then, okay, you take this one, but this one is also going to be taken. This is going to be 3 versus 3, but the difference is, of course, the position of the kings. And I would prefer black in I would prefer white in this position. All right, so still no move yet from Hikaru, and he's down to 6 minutes now. I think the time situation is roughly the same. So queen g7. Sorry. So rook a8 and queen g7. So wait, what is going on? Oh, there was trying to understand. Rook takes, if rook takes a6, what is the idea? You wanna play here? Okay, if you take, then this is gonna be perpetual, yeah? Here checks, and wherever the king goes is another check. And oh, maybe it's depending on where the king goes, because there's also this idea of rook h1. All right, but there is still queen c5. But the thing is, with queen c5, you just go rook h1. Oh, that is such a deep sacrifice. Rook h1 again, and the idea is to take on f8 followed by rook h8. And can you stop this one? I'm afraid black cannot stop it. So wow, what a deep idea by Magnus. This is such a nice idea. Queen g7. Alright, so now rook h8 is coming. This bishop is untouchable. So that is why Hikaru played bishop c6, trying to give more space for the king to d7 in case of rook h8. So rook h8, if rook h8 happens, I think you can just take like this, takes, and then king d7. And the bishop on c6 is protecting the rook on a8. So this is still the last move on the board. Wow. I mean, what a move that Magnus Carlsen found just, you know, within a few minutes on his time. Alright, so how to continue this? What about... oh, maybe bishop b5 is a bit too much. Yeah, white would be happy to have the bishop over here and be free. But is this a move now to play bishop? No, he just played rook h8. He just played rook h8. He just tried to simplify one of the rooks. So it has to be taken now, and after queen takes, king d7. Takes here, and king d7. I think we should go to this line, because after rook h8, if you go here, then rook will go to the other side. And I think white is going to be better here. So while you can take the rook, then you have to do it now. Rook h8 takes king d7, and I think white will continue with how to continue this position. Okay, rook h8 is already played, and I think we're gonna see this position anyway. Can I just play queen f6? Oh, there's an inclusion here. I just realized after rook takes h8, there's bishop b5. Yeah, there's bishop b5. Because if you take the bishop, then queen takes, and then take on a8. So this is the idea. And if you... Wow! But what is going on? He didn't take it. He didn't take it. He did what? He did king d7. So this is actually the position. But what is wrong with bishop b5? Actually, oh, this is rook h2. Nice. You cannot take the rook because it's gonna be mate. Okay, that was yeah, that looks like a very interesting move, but it's unfortunately it didn't work. So this happened. So takes, and queen f6. So this has actually happened. Rook a6, and now again Magnus is only needing half a point. Can he do it here? So rook a6 is already on the board. Can we take this one and then just make perpetual, or what else Magnus is thinking? So okay, let's say we do this, and then I think the king can escape. Yeah, if the king goes here, then there's a check here, so maybe the king goes here, but then there's this check. Well, you have to take on f7 anyway. I don't see any other options. But Magnus is thinking. Let's just put the e-file bar on the board, just to make sure that there's nothing that we miss. Okay, queen f7, queen f7. So the e-file bar shows that this is still equal position anyway. So I suspect there should be enough compensation. Oh, right. Yeah, I think it has to be, I think both of, not sure. Maybe this is fine. If rook h1, then bishop d7, maybe. Yeah, just stopping everything like that, and king goes here. But after this, I'm gotta be careful. Oh my gosh. No, you cannot play. Yeah, you can actually play here, because okay, queen b4 and so on. I mean, whew, it should be fine for white, but things looks very dangerous for black actually. Black has to really play. And here you see king d8 was the move, and after king c8, white is actually better. But how to proceed? Maybe just take on e6 with a check. And yes, Magnus just took it. Magnus took on e6 with a check, and now you cannot block the check with the bishop because this rook on a6 is hanging, so you have to move the king. King goes to b7, and now the commander suggests queen e7, and with yes, so Magnus played it, queen e7, and king a8 was there, but then you can start checking. It's yeah, at the very least it's a draw for Magnus, and it is enough for him to win the event. But would he be more ambitious and try to fight for a win? And he played queen f8 first. The king has to move to a7, because if to b7, this queen can take on b4 with a check. So now what is he gonna do? If queen e7, then maybe bishop b7. But if it happens, then maybe queen will take on b4, and it is enough of a compensation. and there's already a repetition for 2 times, and it's going to be another repetition for the 3rd time. Yeah, Magnus didn't want to take any risk, so he's just going to repeat the moves and forcing black if black wants to play something else. And king a7, and we just see in the live camera players kind of like decided to make a draw. And therefore that concludes the event, and Magnus is the leader. Not only the leader, he's the winner of the 2024 Casablanca Chess variant, and telling just behind him with a point is Hikaru Nakamura, and on the 3rd place it's Anand Viswanathan, and on the last place it is Amin Bassam. What a game from both sides. So I was just wondering if queen takes b4 happens here, because I'm sure if it was another tournament where Magnus was needed to win the game, I think he would have forced the matter like this by taking the b4 pawn. But yeah, there's nothing else to get out of this tournament. It's not even federated because it is a chess variant, so a draw is what he's needed to win the tournament. And yeah, but it was a very well organized event, I would say, and these top players make it very interesting for us to watch and see the games. So just wondering about the Yep, so since there's no draw offers allowed, the only way for them to make a draw is via repetition or perpetual or insufficient material balance. And yep, I think after this they're going to go for the closing ceremony soon. The playing hall will be prepared for that. And yeah, it's again such a nice evening here. Or morning. It's already 4 a.m. of where I am right now, but it's always a pleasure to be commentating interesting chess with Lichess. And thank you for joining us tonight, and hopefully to see you again in the next opportunity. Have a good evening and goodbye.